Woodpecker method.
Okay.
Yeah. And so what we're going to do today in this deep dive is kind of unpack it a little bit. You know, like, what is this method? What is it supposed to do for your chess game? And also, like, what are some of the, the pros and cons based on this reviewer's experience with it?
Yeah, I think what's so valuable about this particular source is that...
this method. And he even achieved some grandmaster, international master named Hans Tikkanen.
Oh.
And this is interesting. Like, right off the bat, the reviewer points out that Tikkanen himself, like, his chess rating actually jumped up significantly, like, after he developed this method. And he even achieved some grandmaster norms.
Oh, wow.
Which is a pretty big deal in the chess world.
Yeah, so that right there kind of suggests something,
Yeah, like maybe it works.
Yeah.
Right. So what is it exactly? Well, the best positions.
Okay.
And there's over 1,100 of these.
Wow.
Yeah. And they're all like the greatest players of all time.
Right.
Repetition. Yeah. Like serious repetition. So the way it works is you're supposed to go through all of these positions and initially try to solve them all within a month.
Okay.
Right. So that's like your first cycle.
Yeah.
And then you cycle through them again, but this time you only have 2 weeks.
Okay.
And then you do it again and you only have 1 week and you keep having the time allowed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. For a total of 7 cycles.
So it's like this time crunch that you're...
Yeah, like a pressure cooker almost.
Yeah.
And when I first read that, I was like, whoa, that sounds intense.
It sounds intense just hearing you describe it.
Yeah.
Like the amount of focus that you would need.
Yeah. And the idea is that by doing this like over and over again with these specific patterns and under like increasingly tighter time limits, these tactical patterns will like get ingrained in your mind, like almost subconsciously.
So you just start seeing them.
Yeah. And the hope is that this leads to faster and more accurate tactical recognition, when you're actually playing a game.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. But it's a pretty bold claim, right? Like
it is.
It's almost like saying this is the holy grail of tactics training.
Yeah. Like if you do this, you'll be able to see every tactic.
Exactly. And understandably, our reviewer was initially kind of skeptical.
Sure.
They were like, can any one method really deliver on that kind of promise?
Right.
But they dove in and they tried it out. So let's talk about what they actually experienced.
Yeah, let's hear about the results.
Yeah, so the biggest takeaway is that it seems like it works.
Cool.
Like they actually say that their tactical vision did improve noticeably.
Right.
And they even attributed a big part of their success to this method in reaching a 3,000 tar rating on chess.com's puzzle app.
Oh, wow. So they actually saw like tangible results.
Yeah, like quantifiable improvement.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
And that's like straight from the source,
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue with personal experience when someone's saying like, I did this and this is what happened.
Exactly.
That holds a lot of weight.
Yeah, so beyond that though, they also pointed out that the book that comes with this method is actually organized really well.
Yeah.
So it's structured in 5 parts.
Okay.
And it starts with like the easier tactics, so there's about 250 of those.
Oh, yeah.
And then it goes into 3 intermediate sections with about 250 each.
Okay.
And then it ends with an advanced section that has about 150.
So it's like a nice progression.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that makes it a lot less intimidating than just like facing a giant pile of puzzles.
Right, yeah.
And it also gives you like a sense of control because you can kind of like tailor how many tactics you work through based on like your skill level and how much time you have.
Yeah, so you can adjust it to your own needs.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and here's something that I thought was really interesting. They talk about the history aspect.
The history?
Yeah, so like for each puzzle, they actually provide some context, like what game it latches onto that narrative.
Right, like, oh, this happened in this famous game?
Yeah.
I need to remember this.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
So, but of course, like any intensive training program, there are going to be some downsides.
Right.
So what were some of the cons that they brought up?
Yeah, what are the downsides?
Well, the first one is time commitment.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a huge one. So the reviewer decided to tackle the first 4 sections.
Okay.
Which is a lot, like almost 1,000 tactics.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, and they admit that might have been a bit too much because during their second month, they basically had no time for any other kind of chess study.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so like that's a serious commitment.
Yeah, you're really dedicating yourself to this method.
Yeah, and I think that could lead to burnout.
Right, or like neglecting other important areas of the game.
Yeah, exactly. Like you might get really good at tactics, but then your end game's going to suffer or your openings are going to.
Right, or just your overall strategy.
Yeah. So I think it's important to be mindful of that.
Yeah, definitely.
The second big con was frustration.
Okay.
Yeah, they were very open about how challenging these tactics are.
Right.
And getting them wrong over and over again led to a lot of frustration.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Like they even mentioned that at one point their neighbor came over to check on them because they were making so much noise, like reacting to the puzzles.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's intense.
It's so funny, but also
it's serious business.
Yeah.
And then the final point that I thought was really important is the difference between like solving puzzles in isolation and actually applying that tactical vision in a real game.
Yeah, that's a big distinction.
Yeah. So while their puzzle rating went up a lot, their improvement in over the board games wasn't as dramatic.
Okay.
And they didn't feel like their calculation speed really increased that much during games.
So it's like one thing to recognize the patterns when you're just doing puzzles.
Yeah, like a tactic is there.
Right, you're specifically looking for it.
Yeah.
But in a game, it's like you have to see it in the midst of everything else that's going on.
Yeah, like you have to be able to spot the opportunity.
Yeah, and you have like time pressure and your opponent is trying to trick you.
Yeah, it's a whole different ballgame.
It's a totally different environment.
Right. So, okay, so we talked about the method, the pros, the cons.
Yeah.
But I think it would be helpful to actually look at some specific examples.
Yeah, I'd love to see what these puzzles actually look like.
Yeah, so the reviewer included a few in the article.
Okay.
So let's start with an easy one.
Okay, easy tactic.
Yeah, and the hint they give is that the black king has very limited movement.
Okay.
So his back rank is covered by a rook, and the g6 square is controlled by a pawn. Okay.
So he's kind of trapped in this mating net.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's all about like controlling those key squares.
Right, so you're basically limiting the king's escape squares.
Exactly. And then once you've done that, even a simple move can deliver checkmate.
Right, because the king has nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to the intermediate level.
Okay, let's step it up a notch.
Yeah, we've got one here called I Can't Believe He Did This Blindfolded.
Wow, that's a great title.
Yeah, and the hint they give is to focus on the weak f7 square.
Okay, f7 classic weakness.
Yeah, and also the tactically defended e6 square.
Okay.
And the key is that Alekhan uses the g4 pawn to like complete the mating net.
So it's not always the obvious pieces.
Right. Sometimes the winning move comes from an unexpected source.
Yeah.
All right, the next one is titled It Wouldn't Be Right Not to Show Tal.
Oh, Tal.
Yeah, so we're talking about Mikhail Tal now.
The magician.
Yeah, the magician of chess, known for his crazy sacrifices.
Yeah.
And the hint here points out that white has a weak back rank. Okay.
And it suggests that sacrificing your queen might actually be the right move.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because white won't be able to defend in time, and then the knight plays a key role in winning the queen back.
So it's like you give up material, but you get something even better in return.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so tell.
Yeah, like a classic tell tactic.
Yeah.
And then from the intermediate group, we have the hardest of them all.
Okay.
Although we know it's not actually the hardest.
Right, right.
But the hint reminds us that a rook is often stronger than a bishop.
Okay.
And it also mentions that our own back rank isn't as vulnerable as it seems because we can create a discovered check with our rook and bishop.
Okay.
And that allows us to win back our queen.
Oh, wow. So there's a lot going on in this one.
Yeah, it's like a multi-phase sequence.
Yeah, it sounds pretty intricate.
Yeah. And then we get to the actual hardest tactic mentioned in the review.
Okay, the real deal.
Yeah. And again, they talk about the rook being superior to the bishop and the possibility of a discovered check.
Okay.
But this one is even more complex.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. And there are probably a lot of tempting but incorrect lines.
So it's really testing your calculation ability.
Yeah, you have to see several moves ahead.
Yeah.
But the real showstopper is the bonus puzzle.
Okay, the bonus.
Yeah, this one comes from the advanced section.
Oh, boy.
And there's no hint provided.
Okay.
But get this, the reviewer tells the story about how Steinitz's opponent,
Steins. Wow.
yeah, like one of the first world champions,
Yeah.
his opponent apparently just resigned in frustration.
He just gave up.
Yeah, and never came back to the game.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so that tells you something about the difficulty level.
Tense. Like,
yeah.
this is serious stuff.
Yeah.
So, all right, we've gone through a lot.
We have.
But what are the key takeaways for you, our listener?
Well, I think the main takeaway is that this method can definitely be a valuable tool
Yeah.
for improving your tactical vision.
Right.
But you got to approach it with realistic expectations.
Yeah, it's not a magic bullet.
No, it's not going to make you a grandmaster overnight.
It takes a lot of time and effort.
Yeah, and the reviewer specifically recommends not biting off more than you can chew.
Right.
Like maybe just start with the first couple of sections.
Yeah.
And don't neglect other aspects of your test development.
Yeah, you got a balanced approach.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think this applies beyond chess too.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, like if you're preparing for a big presentation,
Right.
you need to be able to anticipate challenges.
Yeah, like think several steps ahead.
Yeah, just like in a chess game.
Yeah.
Or if you're trying to learn a new skill,
Right.
recognizing patterns is key.
Yeah, like seeing the recurring themes.
Yeah, and this method shows the power of like focused repetitive practice.
Exactly, like drilling those patterns into your brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as a final thought, I want to leave you with this.
Okay.
Remember that anecdote about the Steinitz puzzle?
Yeah, the one that made the guy resign.
Yeah, exactly. Like think about the dedication and even the emotional investment that it takes to master any skill. Like even in something as intellectual as chess, you can get really emotionally involved.
Yeah, absolutely.
So ask yourself, like, where do you tend to focus your energy the most?
Yeah.
And how do you balance that deep focus with the need for a broader understanding?
That's a great question to think about.
Yeah, it's all about finding that balance.
Yeah, and being aware of how you learn best.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's our deep dive for today.
That was fascinating.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it.
I did.
And